So the topic for tonight was what I often call project inception. I mean, it's a bit of a funky word, but really it's like how to get started on projects, right? And so I've got a little bit of a presentation first, and then some activities that we can go through and discuss that. But just to introduce the topic, right, as an opening. An opener for the session, just to get you in the mood of what is it that I'm actually talking about here. I have a little presentation for you here. So most agile textbooks, right, talk about things where everything is already set up, right? You have a team, you have a backlog, you have everything's ready to go. You just have to go and get going with your implementation. And of course, people often talk about the sprint zero idea, where you set up all the things you have to set up technically, whether it's a continuous integration server or some plumbing or your Azure cloud things or whatever it is you have to set up before you can actually produce anything useful. But that's all very technical. But nothing really talks about where does the backlog come from, right? Where does the team come from? There's a whole bunch of work that typically happen before you're ready to even start anything. So in my line of work, I tend to get that question a lot, which is how do I even start this project? In a non-agile project, you'll tend to have everything defined to the tiniest amount of details. But in agile textbooks, it's often not talked about really very much. So as such, I thought it's an interesting topic to discuss. So you might have a contract, right? You might have something if it's for a client, or even if it's an internal agreement, if it's for an internal tool you're developing, some kind of agreement of, okay, we're going to do this thing. You might have a vague statement of work or a vague idea, description of what it is you want to achieve. But then you have to somehow get a backlog, right, and be able to start. So and there's not much in the literature, again, talking about this. So the big question then is how do you actually do this? And the big thing you want to avoid in my head is this, right? I love that picture from Henrik Nieberg. This misalignment, right, where everybody thinks they have agreed on what to do and how to do it, but actually there's a big misalignment, right? Like we've all agreed we need to go across that river, but some people have understood that we need to build a bridge, and then some others have to build a tunnel, and it just doesn't quite match up, right? So that's the big thing that we want to avoid, right? This kind of misalignment, misunderstanding, and that's the picture that summarizes this problem for me, right? Where someone's thinking about a square, someone's thinking about a circle, and someone else about a triangle, and then we have this illusion that we all agree, and that I don't know, in my experience, that this happens quite a lot. And you actually want to have this process in place, right, where we actually agree on the same thing, and that process, once you discover that people don't actually have the same understanding of what it is you're doing, this process takes a lot of time, right, and a lot of effort and a lot of energy. It doesn't just happen because you have written a piece of document that you send around by email to everybody involved, right? So this is kind of what I call this inception phase or workshop, which is, I insist it's not a document, right? So a lot of projects I see where people write some kind of project management plan or something, and then they just send it by email to people, which is probably the worst way to communicate ideas and possible, because of course a document can be misread or misinterpreted, and a document like that will be complex potentially, and will have errors, and things will be vague, and it's just not a good way to communicate, really. So in my head, it's a workshop. It's a thing you do rather than an artifact, right? And it could be a couple of days, it could be a couple of hours, it could be weeks, and that's before really you start implementing anything. And again, the aim is to get alignment, right, between the team and the client or the users, is to highlight the risks and the challenges and set expectations, right? And this actually takes a lot of effort, and it's often neglected. And the key word again is shared understanding, right? This is what you want to create in the team, right? That we have a shared understanding of what needs to happen and what are the challenges, what are the risks, etc. And really here I'm stealing from this guy, right? From Jonathan Rasmussen, it's a Danish guy, I believe, and he wrote this book, The Agile Samurai. It's a quite good little introduction book to Agile, really. But he also wrote this Agile Inception deck. That's where I got the name from, which is a really good little deck, slide deck, which I've got my own kind of version now. And so I'm gonna just walk through it a little bit. And so basically, the subtitle for him is, there are some questions you want the answers to before you start a project. And if you don't have the answer to those questions, it would be kind of crazy to start, really. And these are the questions. So why are we here? What's the product vision? What's not in scope? What's in scope is often talked about, but what's not in scope is a good question. Who are the neighbors, as in the different teams and stakeholders that all the different teams and stakeholders that you have to deal with that are not directly involved in the project, but you still have to deal with somehow. What's the user journey, right? So what does the user go through in its daily job, right? And where does the tool you're producing, the software you're making, fits into that? Is there already a draft solution? How big is this thing? What's the team makeup? What's going to give? We'll talk about that later. What keeps you up at night in terms of what are the risks, right? And what's your delivery approach and what's your learning strategy, right? So you have a whole bunch of questions here that are very much worth addressing before you start anything. Right? It doesn't mean you need the answer to all of them, but at least you've addressed it explicitly with everyone involved, right? And so if some questions are a bit vague, then at least you know what to do. You know what to do. Right? You have some work to work out what's going on here. Okay, so just going through that quickly. So why are we here? I mean, it sounds like it's an obvious question, but actually, often I found that people don't really actually know, right? Especially developers who are just who've been treated as just a programmer, right? And not being they're not really aligned or in the loop of the big picture, right? So they don't even know why they're here. They're just here to code, kind of thing. But that's kind of not good enough, right? You want to have some kind of reason why we're here, and there'll be lots of reasons, but you want to highlight the number one reason for the project to happen, right? And so that's the first thing to do, really, on any sort of inception, just to set the scene, really. And that really opens up to the product vision. So we had a meetup about that recently, earlier this year, in January, where we talked about that in depth with some of the exercises we actually did live. So the idea is that you want to set up a vision for what it is you want to develop, and it's a product vision. It's not the project vision, right? So it's the vision for what is the product going to be, right? So some good exercise like the product box here, where things don't come in boxes anymore. They used to, with a CD and everything. But if that doesn't happen anymore, but if it did, what would the box look like? So you have a cool exercise where you can get people to draw and put some pictures and draw pictures and put text and so on. This is a really cool little exercise to kind of visualize what the product is about. Yeah, and it's a nice little future perspective exercise, right? Where it's kind of future perspective being something you do when you set yourself in the future. So it's the opposite of a retrospective, right? Where you look back in the past. Here you look into the future. You put yourself in the shoes of, like, the project is finished, the product is out. Now we have to design the box. What is that going to look like? And that helps you define what success means, right? Because you're imagining the future. It's a really good exercise. There are lots of different versions of future perspective, right? You could do the what's on the cover exercise, right? So if you imagine the press release, you imagine quotes that you're going to get from people. You imagine the newspaper headline, you imagine the Amazon feedback you get if it wasn't a product on Amazon. Even it's not, right? It's just a good little quick exercise to get that idea in people's heads, right? And now again, have that shared understanding of what it is that the project is about. What's not in scope, again, yeah, often not talked about, but it's a very useful exercise to do, right? So because people might have agreed of what's in scope, but they might not agree on what's out of scope, right? And also the stuff that's unresolved, right? So the stuff that we're not quite sure yet. It's quite good to make that explicit, so everybody knows we're on the same page, right? Again, creating that shared understanding. Who are the neighbors? So that's fairly straightforward sort of business analysis toolkit thing that you find where you can define the relationships between people. You know, have a influence power metric is quite common, but just to draw on the explicitly visually what who are the neighbors from the core team, right? Do they have to talk to the IT group? Do they have to talk to the security guys? Do they have to talk to this other secondary stakeholder group, etc., etc.? Just to make it obvious, who are we involved with, and who should we talk to maybe eventually, right? Sometimes there is a draft solution architecture already in place. You know, maybe the project, the product, sorry, already exists, right? And it's an extension, but people are new, so they don't. There's already an architecture. Maybe they need to know what it is, right? Or some constraints because the big corporate client you're working for, they have some constraints on what the architecture must be or must have, right? So it's another good thing to look at, and it's not so much about the architecture itself, but perhaps the bits that are which bits are legacy system, which bits are old, which bits have got to be replaced, which bits we don't know, it has to be decided yet, right? Or which things are kind of be careful, there's no test environment for this thing. And again, technology choices, if they've already been made, let's share them, let's make it explicit. The one that have been decided, the one that have not been decided, the one that should have been decided but haven't, etc. Right? Or equally the reverse, things that have been decided already, but maybe actually it was too early. Let's discuss that. Right? How big is this thing? Well, that's kind of an obvious one, but again, that's not really an estimation exercise because it's too early to do potentially. Just to have an idea of how big the thing is. Is it just a couple of weeks, or is it half a year, right? Just a rough sizing like this is quite useful, just to build a picture in your head of what's going on. The team makeup, that's a useful thing to do too. Visually, where are people? Are they distributed? Are they all in the same team? Are they distributed geographically, but also in terms of roles, and also how often you talk to them, right? Is it almost never? Is it weekly? Is it daily? Those kind of things. And is part-time, who is not part-time, who is full-time, the skill that they have, are they more like a tester, developer, PM, etc. So I'm going quite quickly on purpose because I want to get to the activities, but some of things are quite obvious, but some are really not, and I think it's neglected a lot of the time, so I'll spend more time on this. So risk here, again, it's another kind of obvious thing that most project managers will do, right? Most people have a risk register and that kind of thing. But again, most people talk about project risk, right? And they don't often talk about product, what we call product risk. So, what it goes back to the product vision, right? And defining the success for the product. So you can talk about what would make the product fail as a product, right? Like it's not used by enough people, or it's not shared enough between people, whatever it is, right? But it's good to highlight those things, and also as a team, right? So I often build a team skills matrix on those workshops, just to get an idea of who knows what, right? And who is an expert and who is not an expert. So a little scoring system, like a 0, 1, 2, 3, 3 being you're the experts, 0, you've never touched this thing, you have no idea, and 1 and 2 being everything in between. And then you can easily highlight if there's a gap, in the team, or not. I mean, this is all basic stuff, but often kind of neglected, or at least it's written down in the document, but it's not necessarily shared in a sort of workshop way to make sure everybody is on the same page. A good one as well, like is often not done, is this thing at the bottom here, where our scoring things based on what I call distance to knowledge. So yes, let's say there is we need to do this website. It's in React, let's say, but okay, how complex is this thing compared to the skills of the team, right? So you could score it from like 1 to 5, right? Where 1 is, okay, just about everyone in the world knows how to do this, right? This is kind of the obvious of the obvious. Everybody knows how to do this. But level 2, be okay, lots of people have done this, including someone in our team. So, you know, it's fine. Even if that person struggles, I can still find out help, you know, from the outside world. Yeah. 3, someone in our company has done this. So it's not in the team directly, but we have access to the expertise because you just have to maybe go to a different department or something, but it's still kind of there, right? Then 4, someone in the world, right, has done this, but it's not in our organization. It's not in the company. So it's going to be a lot more difficult to get some information about this. And then 5, you know, the most complex perhaps, where nobody in the world has ever done this before. It's really quite innovative. So I quite like to rate things that way, right? Because it gives a good idea of the complexity that we're facing from a skills point of view. Does that make sense? Just checking with people before I carry on.
It makes sense.
Yeah. So what's going to give? So this is a phrase I like to use because often people will have decided in advance, right, what the budget is, what the time scale is, and the scope as well, even though that's not very agile and a very agile thing to do, but that's often sort of fixed. But even then, if it's agreed to be flexible, how flexible, right? And when I ask, you know, what's going to give, is when you're faced with there's no time left, right? You're a week before the deadline, let's say, or you haven't got any more budget, right? You've burned all the money, and you've got nothing left. Now you've got to make decisions, right? And so what's going to give between all those variables, right? Because when people say they don't have more budget, well, they could maybe ask for more, right? And maybe it's easy to get some more. Maybe it's not, but maybe it is, right? Or would they rather? So what's going to give, right? Would they rather ship on time, right, and keep the time that they set earlier, and ask for and de-scope stuff just to be on time? Or would they rather, well, you know, I wanted that time, but it's not that big a deal. I'd rather be late and have more scope, right? For example. So you can play this game of if you know, if push comes to shove, we're gonna what's going to give, right? I think it's a very interesting discussion to have, right? Which things can be bent when you don't want to bend them, but if you have to, what would it be? The user journey, that's probably the most important in my eye, and often the most neglected aspect before we start a project. Because often, you know, your scope will be agreed, there'll be some kind of a vague backlog or some high-level epics defined or something. But it's often not well established or talked about or shared with the team. Where does this thing that you're developing fits within what we call the user journey, right? So in their journey, as in their journey at work, right? So they start work, they do some with this tool, they do something else with another tool, and then they would use your potentially new tool to do X, Y, Z, and then they go to another tool and do something else. So what's that journey like, right? It's important to really explicitly express this with the team and have that shared understanding, right? Is it are there alternatives, right? If it's not a web app that they're going to use for their calculations, let's say, do they use a spreadsheet instead that they have, or do they have some weird workarounds that they do stuff by hand manually or something, or do they use yet another tool but they're really unhappy with it? What is the situation here? The value proposition so I can't go into detail on all those techniques, but it's just to give you a flavor of how to do this. The value proposition canvas, which is this, it's really quite a useful tool. I recommend you have a look. Google it. It's really quite good. So story mapping, again, Google that. It's really quite good to get a flavor of the big picture, right? What's going on in the whole thing. Because you can define workflows, and you can define a walking skeleton, which is also a very good technique. I recommend you Googling. It goes hand in hand with story mapping and fidelity profiles that we can talk about later as well, if we want. To define a level of fidelity, right? So if it's a low fidelity solution or a high fidelity solution to some of the different aspects of the product, right? So all of this really, and user personas, I skipped at the beginning, is really quite useful to spend time explaining all of that and bringing the whole team on board with that. What's your delivery approach? So often I found teams just jump into whatever method has been agreed ahead of time without really understanding why they're doing it or not, right? Or maybe your organization that says, well, here we do Scrum, right? Or we do Kanban. But I mean, it depends on the project. It depends on the constraints. So a lot of people, I think, jump into choosing a technique without really looking at the pros and cons of each, or which one is actually most appropriate for the situation. You know, if it's Scrum, okay, are you comfortable with the sprinting idea? Are people really going to sprint, right? Or, you know, do you really deliver at the end of each sprint, or do you wait until you have 5 sprints and then you deliver, right? Or if you're going to do Kanban, okay, fine. But, you know, there are pros and cons to that too, right? Are you going to really give up the sprinting thing? I mean, that's fine if you're quite a mature team that can work really well. But that sprinting cadence can be quite good to bring people on board when they are busy and not easy to get to, right? For example. So just to make it explicit, what are the trade-offs you've made here in the choice of the methodology? Or maybe it's the SDM, right? Or maybe it's something else, or hybrid. But whatever it is, you know, what's the rationale for your choice of methodology, right? Again, let's share that with the team, I think. And if and even deeper within Scrum, like what is it? What's the length of the sprint? Is it 2 weeks? Is it going to be 3 weeks? What's been decided and why? And if it hasn't been decided, that's fine too. But let's make that explicit again. Yeah? So the final point was that I'd like to tackle in those Inception steps is what's your learning strategy? So I think for me that's a really big topic, and I could spend an hour on this easily. Don't worry, I won't. But it's right now. But it's, you know, if we're going to be agile, that means we're going to change things. That means we're going to adapt, right? Inspect and adapt. We're going to try and get the best product out there. But that means you need some kind of learning strategy, right? That means you need to learn as you go. Right? And often people say, well, it's agile, we'll just figure it out later, or, you know, things will just come clear with time. But that's naive at best, right? You kind of need a strategy for turning things that are unknown into actually known things, right? And not having a strategy is a real trap. That you have this illusion that you're learning, but really it's not explicit enough, I think. So of course you have retrospectives and feedback from sprint reviews, but that's often not really quite enough. And you need a kind of proactive approach to learning and what I call product discovery, right? So whether it's discipline learning, and a very good technique, I recommend you have a look, or, you know, using spikes in Scrum, which is a big thing in Scrum, but often not used, right? People just don't even know what spikes are often. Or, you know, doing minimum viable experiments, as I call them, or hypothesis-driven development. There's all sorts of ways to get your learning strategy up and running, and to do product discovery in a you know, in a professional sort of way, rather than just hope that it happens, right? So again, a very important thing to discuss before you start, right? To be on the same page of what's going to be our approach here. Okay, good. Any questions I should ask before I can? I've been really fast. I realize that. But...
Hi, David.
Yes.
I've put a question on the parking lot, but I'll bring it up now. Is there a danger that we confuse knowledge with skill when we're assessing resource capabilities?
So yeah, okay. So in you're looking at.
So you're talking about, auditing a team, basically.
Yeah,
So skill is one thing, knowledge is another.
absolutely, yes.
So the scoring system was, and also it kind of links to the second point, was about, who scores? Is it self-scoring? And, how do you, is that a good test to get people to self-score?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is debatable, right? But I think it's, on this, I think I would say if someone's own perception is a low score, then whether that's true or not, you have some information there, right? That okay, that person is not confident or for some reason. Well, of course, you can't know that, right? Because really, what's their real true ability? You can't really know this. So I'm not sure how you would. I mean, it's not like you're going to make them pass a test, right? But so let me ask you back to you. When you say knowledge, what do you mean by knowledge? Do you mean the true skill, or do you mean knowledge from a different perspective, like the knowledge of the product or knowledge of the domain? Or
well, I think one thing is to say, "Oh, I know about Agile," and another thing is actually putting it into practice.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and sorry, because I work from a training background.
Yeah.
It's just if we're talking about risks and assumptions, then this is something that and then I guess it links up to your point about learning strategies. If we're not asking the questions and grilling people about actually their levels of skills, etc., then it could present a problem further down the line, I guess.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's another aspect to Inception, I think, for me, which is the team building. And when I say team building, I don't mean going to play mini golf or going for a meal, which is often what team building seems to mean sometimes. Oh, we'll just have a social activity to get to know each other. That you're not really building a team at all by doing this. You're just having a social event, right? So I think that there is a journey to build the team, right? And so to make explicit whose skills is best, who's best at what, and it's a long journey. I'm not sure you could do this in just a short time before project starts, right? But yeah, getting the right people for the team, for the project, that's a big question, I suppose. And I'm not sure. Yes.
I was going to say that I think the value in this skills matrix is not the scores. So, they're somewhat arbitrary, and to me, it wouldn't really matter if they're right or wrong. It's the conversations that you have is where you'll find the value, right? So, I mean, as soon as you've written those scores down, they're almost meaningless, but hopefully it will generate some really valuable conversations. And then you can forget about the scores. It's just a way of facilitating.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. You can see, like, if there's a lot of one on one, like making tea, there's a lot of one, let's say. Okay, if making tea is really a big thing in your team, then what are you going to do about it, right?
Yeah.
If it's a technical skill, okay, let's do a lot of pair programming when that comes along, for example, or whatnot, right? But it gives some data for the team to kind of self-organize, right? Otherwise, we talk about self-organization of teams, but how? How, if it's just hey, you have a backlog, go and code. On what basis do you self-organize? Okay?
I think I like the point that you've made, Ian, about it opens up a conversation. I think the tea analogy is I might know how to make tea, but I might make a crap cup of tea, and it's been a while since I've made one. So if it opens up the conversation and opens up the opportunity to try practicing it again, then I guess that's the start, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it gets people talking, and hopefully people are honest about areas where they're that they could learn more. So again, I think it's a conversation that could be useful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Right. So just looking at the time, I'll move on, but we can go back to that if we want to discuss that more later. So the next phase here really was to go into groups. So I thought what we could do is, again, go into breakout rooms just like before, and hang on, discussing groups like, so what do you think, how do you start a project, right? What sort of things do you do before you start anything like this? Does this Inception thing make sense? Did you learn anything? So just to talk about the challenges that you may have, as well as what solutions do you have for that? Yeah. And so I thought that it depends on how many groups we can have. So hang on, rooms. So I think if we have maybe 5 groups, so I've made this blank sheet here, team 1, team 2, etc. Right? If you see that on the screen. So if you can use Miro in your groups, right, to put there in those boxes what your findings are, right, in terms of, so 2 things, challenges, and then what solutions you have for those. Yeah? So you can use post-it notes or text or whatever you want. Right? You have on the left-hand side, you have text and sticky notes and arrows and whatever you want, comments and all sorts of things. But of course, just use the frame that you have for your team, if that makes sense. Is it clear, the exercise? Have I explained that clearly enough? So go into groups, discuss the whole Inception thing. Is this a good idea? Do you do other things and from what I presented? If so, what is that? Or do you have challenges, things that you don't know how to solve? And then they can brainstorm solutions about it. Does that make sense?
Let's try it.
Okay, so if we look at so team 1, who was that? Team 1, so David, Ian, and Paul. Would you like to talk us through what you discussed briefly? 1 minute.
I don't mind. So I think the conversation was really around the sort of topics that we discussed, and the ideas that people had almost came before Inception. They were pre-Inception. So it was, it felt like it is, how do you get things set up in the first place? You know, how do you begin in terms of, you know, before you even think about a team or, you know, having much ideas about the product, how do you need to stage, how do things start, you know, at the very beginning? And there were conversations around, you know, are we running a project or are we building a product?
Yeah,
we were talking about budgeting and different types of budgeting, and that, I think that goes into the product project conversation as well. We spoke about contracting, especially if you're contracting external suppliers, on what basis would you contract them? But a lot of them were about, well, several of them, not all of them, were about sort of, you know, some of the fundamental things that need to be in place up front.
yeah.
Said almost before you even get the team together in a room, really.
Yeah, it sounds like it's more like ways of working almost. Like, you know, how do we, are we mature enough as a company to work this way? Like, if you have to talk about contracts and like I read how to avoid big bets and stuff like that. This can be long conversations, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. It does. It's the sort of conversations you might have in organisations that are relatively new to agile ways of working. If agiles are relatively new to them, these are the sort of conversations you might find yourself having. So I think that's where we might have found ourselves on our board.
Okay, good. And did you think about solutions to those? How to do this?
I think waterfall's a way to go, to be honest.
Waterfall is the way to go. Okay. Where is kick out?
That's a joke.
Remove.
No magic answers to these, I don't think, to be honest.
Well, these are tough questions, right? So yeah. Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Team number 2, which was Martin, Nick, and was it Wilson? I think he had to go, perhaps. One of you want to show us what you talked about?
Yeah, so we were talking about, I think Wilson and Martin were talking about, I think Wilson was talking about how he tends to jump in on projects. He's drafted in when a project is really initiated. And of course, there's a lot of confusion in terms of, well, where are we at? What resources do we have, etc. Martin was also talking about, kind of his role. Martin, I don't know if you could kind of talk a bit more about your particular predicaments.
Yeah, so supplier not engaged.
Yeah. So I guess basically there was boiling down to a culture thing where as a person in a new project, we were tasked to rewrite the software in a new way, new stack, while the domain knowledge was taken by elders in the old team, and they were reluctant to share those bits with us. And that's what a sort of pre-Inception problem, where there's no one who could ask, and if someone ask someone, there's the answers are vague and misleading to you. And I believe the main problem was that the stakeholders weren't really involved at the very beginning, and they weren't really guided to Agile and how we work. So in the team where I was working, the leaders weren't really understanding what we're going to do and why. So that's brings again the problem of culture and communicating values.
So yeah, so we summarised that in terms of through those two dialogues is really about the classic culture piece. I think it was interesting. Wilson talked about team members being onboarded in terms of when and how, which I guess links back to your point, David, about learning strategy. So we talked things about well, this is how we do things around here, and about actually how we can start communicating success or even failure in terms of the way that things are being done, and even to the point of without having to talk about Agile, it's just about how we're delivering value. And people at the end of the day, and certainly my limited experiences, people really don't care how you've done it. It's just about the fact that you've delivered value. If people want to find out more about, well, how did you go about doing that, if it was under budget or not, I think those success stories need to go out quite quickly.
So yeah, so again, the culture, ways of working, things like that, to be in place before you can do anything. So yeah, again, this sounds like just like the previous group, like a pre-Inception almost, right? But that's okay, because these are things that have to be sorted, and they are not easy things to do, for sure. Okay, thank you. Team number 3, lots of post-its. Very good. So one of you want to share what you got here?
So one of my bugbears at the moment is about the customer journey. So when you've got layers of the organisation, it's trying to get that customer value and that understanding the customer down through the layers who may not work in that space. So it's getting that propagated through to sort of the development teams. And not building it up from user story upwards, because you end up having a much larger backlog when you end up doing the user mapping. And also it's the environment that's important. So I think often or not we say this is the project, these are the timelines, this is who's going to do the work, these are the skills they need, but what are the soft skills, what is the environment that needs to be created in order for our teams to flourish? So understanding that whole piece around culture and organisation, which I think sometimes is left behind or comes quite late, and driving those behaviours through maybe pillars of the project or pillars in the organisation. And just quickly just one more, so timing of the product, so understanding from a very high level, and this goes alongside with the why, the business value and customer value you know, where's the opening? How long are we going to take to get to market? Is it viable for us to go at that point, or are we just going to lose it? So lose the opportunity. So really getting understanding of that space as well.
Yeah, that's good. Because I found that myself as well, that people have deadlines, but they don't even really know why.
Yeah, and just getting that full picture to everybody. Yeah.
Excellent. I guess not. There was no team 4, and then team 5. So that would be who did we have here? Ted, Jeff, and Arabella. So what did you have for us here?
I think, like a lot of the other teams have said, most of the biggest challenges, I think, sit before you get into this sort of workshop. They tie into, we talked a bit about common language and mindset being all part of this. Certainly from my own perspective, I work with agile teams and agile operations, but most of our big stakeholders come from different mindsets. So you have to cross that bridge somehow. Trying to do that by kicking off a workshop will usually result in something that's not very productive, again, in my experience. This is a great approach if everybody's already thinking agile. If they're not, then you have to deal with those issues first. And that got tied into a bunch of other things around, there will always be constraints around the project, talked a little bit about the iron triangle, which will always exist, and the natural trade-offs that exist within that and how those need to be resolved. So what else? We talk quite a bit about tools. If we're used to working with small teams and smaller organisations, everybody sets everything up the way they want it to work for them, not necessarily, whereas larger organisations tend to have more of a, this is the way we're going to work type of model. But getting to the right tool set, I think, is a really important factor, in many ways more important. And I think a final point is in many ways, the whole point of Agile is you don't know the answer at the start. So a lot of what I think you need to do to set up a good team is to establish the learning model, to establish the way you're actually going to have an effective model, recognizing that while the product vision or the overall idea might not move very far, the details and the execution will almost certainly change a lot as you get into the project. So, and this is a little bit my bias, that, you know, I'm very much come from a let's get the operation functioning and ticking, and then you can use that to learn and adapt and deliver the right outcome and the right products, if you've got the engine working well. So a couple of the things that we looked at for resolving these things, whether you use a workshop, a massive factor is establishing a level of trust and starting to build relationships with the key stakeholders. You've got to get that in place so that when things change, which they will, you've got a foundation to actually have those conversations and to manage that and manage those expectations. And then probably more within the team, starting to establish a team charter, so starting to establish that common language and common expectations. I've talked about ways of working and standards there. I think the comment was actually common definitions for things like, you know, what is a bug, what are our outcomes we're trying to achieve, almost definition of ready, definition of done, they all start to fit into that. But it's getting the foundations for that into a team charter for some common ways of working. Is there anything I've missed, guys, from that summary?
No, I don't think so. The trade-offs were basically around the iron triangle factor, so to say. But then the timeline and deadlines, in a way, are linked to that. But it's specifically between that mindset of more of a waterfall model where you present a plan, so you have a clear view of timeline and deadlines, even if it's not achievable, not realistic, where with Agile, as you said, is a work in progress, and you need to measure your progress and the quality of it, not necessarily just provide timelines and deadlines for the sake of it.
Yeah, and just to add to something that Jeff said before about building those relationships and senior stakeholders, we talked about how it's important that they're active in part of the inception process, that they kind of don't neglect or delegate their responsibility, because having them on board and becoming an advocate for what the team is trying to achieve is really vital.
Very good. I very much like the team charter thing. I mean, I kind of mentioned that earlier with the team building stuff. But I don't know what you think here, but in my experience, there's kind of two levels of it. There's the immediate team, right? The developers and the testers and Scrum Master if you do Scrum, etc. But in terms of ways of working at that level, right, at the team level, where you want to decide, do you do pair programming? Do you not do pair programming? Do you how do you do code reviews? Do you do them live? Do you do them in groups? Do you do them in pairs? How do you work, right, at that kind of level? But then you have perhaps the more organizational stuff that was talked about in Team 1 more, right? So ways of working at the level of the whole organization, right? Like how do we do contracts? What's agile for us, etc. So there's this kind of two coaching level almost, right? I don't know if that makes sense. If you've seen these kind of two levels, or did you think of it in a different way?
Certainly, that's I think part of what I was thinking of, and I think it is definitely a bit of both. In my own work, I do a lot around project governance and how do you actually have that governance layer over agile projects, which you can't get away from. It has to exist. For an organisation always wants to have some sort of governance over their projects, but the way it's done and the way it should be approached in agile is very different from how it would be in waterfall. And I think that's almost the sort of stuff that would go into more of an organisational level charter. So understanding how the agile team fits into the rest of the organisation, as well, of course, the sort of the team level, which can be a lot more specific and a lot more down into the weeds for how the team's actually going to work.
Can I just comment? I've worked in two Scrum projects in the past, and I've had very limited experience, but I have almost felt very constrained by people implementing what they feel is a very rigid framework for whatever agile methodology they use. And so this is the process, this is the framework. Along comes an agile coach and it says, hey, you didn't do your retrospectives, shame on you. And it's kind of, there's no flexibility in give from some organization, people feel that they have to do it. Otherwise, it's just not agile. We're not doing agile, are we? And it's kind of, well, hold on a minute. You're trying to mold this into in an organization. And there needs to be a kind of a meeting of minds there about how that might work. Or am I being very naive?
No, that is, that's where the mindset clashes from my experience, where you're trying, especially when you're moving from kind of waterfall organization into an agile way of working. The first thing that people tend to do as David said in the beginning, is you pick your framework and you go with it, and everyone has to do it, which may not be right for each project. But then when people start missing very specific acts of the Agile framework that they've chose to go through, like the retrospectives, that is there not because you're going to tick a box. It's because it's fundamental for the continuous improvement, the learning, the development. And that is a whole different issue if the team doesn't want to do those or they're not engaged with them. It may be that, again, they have never done the team charter and they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing.
I think, and also for me, with all the thing around COVID, I wonder how much of that restriction and that framework has been lifted or ignored in the need to actually get something out there. And I wonder if in the retrospective, people will go, do you know what? Why did we always have to do something like this? Because this is what and maybe it's different circumstances and it's probably not right to kind of use something like that. But I think it's been interesting that some organizations have been able to kind of just suddenly remove those certain restrictions, I would say, of Agile in terms of governance that have allowed them to actually push things through.
Well, some constraints are good, right? Because it forces you to focus, right, and do away with what actually is not that big a deal or not that important, right? And I think in some way, so I've seen teams where with the whole pandemic isolation thing, they were just plodding along sprint by sprint and kind of delivering stuff, but kind of nobody really cared all that much. It was sad to see, really. But then they're cutting budgets and stuff, so we actually have to deliver value now because otherwise they're gonna cut us off. So okay, let's deliver value now, which is like finally, right? But in a way that constraint actually made them let's actually forget that feature. I know I was banging on about it for months, but actually, you know what? It doesn't really matter. We really need that one. Otherwise, we're gonna get our head chopped off. So in some way, it forces you to really focus your thing. It's a bit like if you talk about an MVP, right, and you want to minimize the amount of features that you have, and it's really hard to do because people want more, right? That's a natural instinct. But if you put a real constraint on this, then you don't have a choice, right? It really has to be minimal, right? But my take on this, just briefly, I think it really depends on where you are on your maturity level, right? So if I take Scrum, for example. So if someone is really quite mature with Agile in general, I feel quite constrained by Scrum because even though the idea of sprinting just feels a bit too harsh. Do I really have to wait, right, the end of the sprint to talk about what we've done and to have a retrospective? I mean, it feels kind of silly. I just want to do it more continuously. But equally, if a team is new to this and they ask for my advice, I'm going to say do Scrum, right? Do sprinting every 2 weeks. But then people will say, well, what did you say 2 weeks? It depends on the context, doesn't it? I was like, well, yes, but for this team, they're new. 2 weeks seems like a good default. I mean, it might not be the optimum time, right? But for now, it's it's probably quite good to start with, right? And there's a reason for sprinting, right? So are you mature enough as a team to do away with the sprinting idea, right? Can you actually be disciplined enough to do it continuously, or do you? Or is it just an excuse because you can't be asked, right? You can't be bothered with the meetings and all so it's just cowboy, right, stuff.
Yeah.
It's an excuse to get rid of stuff because you can't, you just not.
Yeah, I've had exactly that experience. A team, we were using Scrum, using it very effectively. They said, hey, we don't need this anymore. We'll go to Kanban. And they stopped delivering. They just fell off the radar completely. It's very easy to do. I mean, I'm very much of the view that Agile is essentially a mindset. The practices and the specific things that you do sit on top of that, but it's the mindset that makes it work. And this goes back to Toyota. You look at how Toyota works, and it's all in the mindset. Scrum is a really good framework to help people learn some of that mindset. It won't do the whole job, but it really is a good framework to help people learn that mindset. But it's again, in my experience, it's maturity is part of it, but there's also a regression there. People a team can look really mature, but if the context changes, that same team can regress back, and that tells you that the fundamental mindset wasn't really cemented in place. It was there because the practices were supporting it. Take away the scaffolding of the practices, and it can collapse very easily.
Yeah. And also, I think there are things that you've put in place that made you better, but then you need to let them go to be even better, right? So like when you're learning cycling, you need the stabilizers, right? But at some point you need to get rid of them, right? And if you really want to be a racing champion, right, you're not going to be a racing champion with your little wheels on the side, right? And in a way, I see sprinting that way a bit, right? It's like the scaffolding that I think Jeff you mentioned, I think, where you need that in place, right? But if you take it off, there's a risk that you're just not ready, right? And then you fall back. But at some point, if you need that agility, you need to be able. So it's really hard from the organizational point of view to, when a team says we want to do away with sprinting, if I carry on with that example, is it because they're really that mature? They really should do without, if they would actually be better, or they're gonna just fall flat on their face because they're just being lazy about it or something. It's going to be quite a challenge to distinguish the two. But then, if you have a learning adaptive organization, you should be able to experiment that way and say, well, let's apply agile mindset to this, right? Let's run an experiment. Let's try. If it fails, have some measurements and metrics to be able to judge whether that's a successful experiment or not, and then learn from there, right? Right. I'm looking at the time. So it's a good discussion. I don't mean to stop it. It's quite interesting. So I'm looking at the time, but I think I'm going to skip some steps simply because we're running out of time. What do we have here? Not. Okay. Nick, seems like it's you. But you know what? I can give you a minute or two if you want to think about what you if there's some things we haven't talked about that you would like to address. Perhaps that's a good idea, I think. So if you want to take a minute or so just to think about that, and I will do this to give you a little timer. Boom. Okay, cool. All right. So, who wants to go first? Who wrote that one? The big one, the new one.
That was me. Yeah. So I guess I've always worked with teams that have been co-located. They might not necessarily be sitting together, but they're always in the same office, and they will come together for meetings, stand-ups, that sort of thing. And it is very much heralded as something that, this is one of the success factors. You be co-located, your team's effective. So now that we're all dispersed and online, how do we maintain or even thrive in that sort of an environment?
Good question. How many hours have you got? It's a big topic, of course, and there's actually lots of meetup. I don't know if you shop around a bit on meetup sites on this very topic. There've been lots of discussion lately on that, as you can imagine, and there's lots of good resources out there, actually. In fact, I recommend there is Stefan Wolfer, I think he's a German guy. He's doing from, I think, the Age of Product, I think is his group company called, and he's got a training course, kind of workshop called Remote Agile. I recommend if you want to have a look. It's pretty good. It gives a lot of pointers on how to do this sort of stuff remotely. But yeah, big question. And well, tools like Miro, like I've used there, are quite good, right? I mean, I know I'm jumping into tools here, but it's a way to try and get that collaboration going, right? And that it's true that most textbooks talk about Agile being it's best done co-located, right? Small team, co-located, etc. That seems to be the how do you say, the received wisdom, right? But this is how things are done. And now this is like, oh, okay, wait, what happens now, right? So, and I think for me, actually, it's not so much, well, in my own experience right now, after being working from home for about a month, and I'm such an extrovert, I'm actually finding it really hard because I'm the guy who wants to talk to people, who wants to brainstorm and do stuff like that, and it's really hard. But actually, I've got colleagues who are kind of, very introverted, and they're coders, and actually they're very productive. They love it because they've got less distraction. They can actually get stuff done. So I think it really depends on where you are in the space there. It can very vary, I think. And then again, the big distinction that I make here is that it's not so much working from home as in the geographic separation. I mean, that's obviously not that great. I'd rather be face-to-face, right? I'd rather be on the whiteboard and brainstorming stuff. But there are tools like this one, like we're using now, that can sort of mitigate that problem, at least a bit. Right? But the biggest problem for me is being asynchronous. So separated, not so much geographically, but separated in time. And I'm not necessarily talking about time zones, although that's obviously a thing, but also because people are working from home they've got childcare problems. Right, so some people are working mornings and then again in the evening or really early in the morning, and it's really hard to find a time where we're together in the same place, to do this synchronous work that needs to be synced, right? Like in time, like discussing real-time things. So with an Inception workshop that I run sometimes, I try to sometimes think, okay, are there things that can be actually done asynchronously, right? So people can do that alone and think about it on their own. So we minimize the time we need to do on the meeting because it's hard to find the time. Right? And I'd rather be face to face, but constraints are what they are, right? Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, definitely. I think the biggest challenge that we've seen is that those kind of over the top of the screen conversations where you can just ask something and get an instant response, even with instant messaging, all of that sort of stuff, there is still that asynchronous process there.
Yeah.
And I think you're right in terms of the personality types as well. Not just kind of introvert, extrovert, but also, if you, like you are an external processor, you want to grab somebody and get a whiteboard and then bounce ideas off people. You then have to turn to different and new tools to try and achieve the same thing online.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another question we haven't talked about. I think from you, Nick. Was it? I think you wrote it. Is that right, Nick? About or is it someone else? So what was it? If you come in on the project, how do you influence in the hope that you can put the brakes on something that is not aligned to any values?
Yeah, sorry, I did raise that question. I think it was just basically on the back of Wilson on the breakout rooms, really. If we're talking about Inception stuff, I mean, he was talking about he's just coming in halfway through it. So, yeah. $64 million question, I don't know.
Yeah, so I've got something to say on that. But before I go, just realizing there's only, so if you need to go, please, of course, do go. Just to remind you of the feedback, so you can stay after the call if you stay on the board if you want, and then just add the feedback if you want. That'll be very useful for me. Thank you. But just so again to answer you there, what I tend to do, and I'm not saying that's the answer, right? And I'm sure there's millions of ways to address this, but it's a kind of an agile coach thing, right? But one thing you can do is like a value game. So a thing that I've made in the past, and I've yet to think about how to do it remotely, but I think something with my work could work. But I've made lots of little cards, right, with like values on them. So when I say value, I mean, I don't know, respect, complicity, we help each other, those kind of themes, right? You can make all sorts of, there's cards that exist out there. You can buy them, you can make them yourself, and you let the team. You can organize a workshop type event where you let the team decide, okay, what are our values, right? And that can be part of your team charter, right? Because there's so many values, you can't possibly do them all. You can't possibly adhere to all of them or apply them all, right? There's just too many good things about it. Which one do you actually care about? Which one actually matters to you as a team, right? And you just pick, I don't know, you decide 4, 5, 6 of them, right, as a limit. And you decide these are our values, these are our team alliance or team charter, however you want to call it. And if you have this as a reminder, right, you can always sort of not do a blame game, but say, hey, this happened. This is on a retrospective, for example, you could say, well, this is not quite aligned with our values. So you have an artifact, right? You have a tool to get back to and say, hey, this is what we agreed, remember? Right? And it's not imposed by the company or anyone else outside. The team decided that, right? And so you have a higher chance that they will adhere to it to begin with. But just in case, they have something to remind themselves that this is what we're about. Does that remotely answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. I think obviously it's maybe for another discussion, David.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah. Another big topic. Anyway, 9:00. Good timing. So I'm gonna put this session to a close, if that's okay. Thank you for all joining. Apologize for the hiccups here and there. I was trying to manage Miro and Zoom and trying to facilitate and present at the same time, and I realized that's just a bad idea. So lessons learned for me here. I just can't facilitate and present and take care of people in the waiting room and so on. So I apologize for that. But anyway, it was great to see you there. Great discussions. Another failure of mine, I didn't say I recorded all this. So I'm quite keen on putting the discussion and the video into YouTube so that you have a record of it. But please, if one of you doesn't like the idea or want to be, doesn't want this to be out there, just let me know and I won't. All right. But if I don't hear anything, I just will. That's the deal. Okay. So thank you all for coming. Have a great evening, and hopefully there'll be another meetup at some point next month. There's some plans in the making already, but I'm not going to share it yet because I don't want to commit, just in case. But you'll soon see on the meetup site on the Agile Oxfordshire page so a new meetup coming up for next month. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, David. It was really good.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Right. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.